because I was literally faced with death. Like, I was literally dying.
Hey guys, it's Donnie here, and I just want to let you know that we've recently launched a content development company, and this company helps people get social content. You know you need to put out a lot of content nowadays to get engagement out there in all your social platforms. Well, we've come up with a really cool way to help you get videos, blog posts, memes, social posters, and infographics for whatever social site you need. So check us out at successchamps.us and learn more about how you can get social content for your social media.
Support for this podcast comes from Point Blank Safety Services and Blue Family Fund. Blue Family Fund, helping dependents of law enforcement families on their journeys. Blue Family Fund is a nonprofit that raises funds and offers financial support through higher education scholarships for dependents of law enforcement officers and by providing financial assistance for families of fallen law enforcement officers. Every dollar donated will go to the families of police officers, either through scholarships to dependents of police officers or as aid to fallen officers' families. Visit us at bluefamilyfund.com.
You're listening to Donnie Success Champions, where I believe everybody is on a journey. Life is all about the stories you can tell and teach later. You're going to hear the stories of people who have overcome hardships, failures in life to find success along their journey. All right, guys, so this is going to be another tough episode, but a really inspirational one. Bringing in Lorraine Reguly, as she comes in and she shares her story of what happened to her as a 14-year-old young girl and how it spiraled her life down a really dark road, and how through happenstance she found that thing to grab onto, changed and transformed her life, and is now helping others as they go through their journey. Enjoy this one, guys. Hey guys, it's going to be another fun episode today. I'm bringing you Miss Lorraine Reguly. Did I say that right? Damn, I got that right. Look at that go. I love it. And she told me how to pronounce it beforehand, but I got it. I told her I was going to mess it up. But so we're going to hear her story, hear her journey. So Miss Lorraine, welcome to the show, my dear. Glad to have you. Tell us your story.
Oh, thanks for having me, Donnie. Okay, so I don't even know where to begin. They always say start at the beginning. And
right,
I think,
so what year were you born? No, I'm kidding. Don't go back that far.
No, I think for me it was when I was a teenager. That was when I had a really traumatic experience that kind of led the course of my life from that point. And I was 14 years old and I was raped.
Yeah.
And I was a virgin to top it all off.
Mm.
So dealing with that trauma was extremely difficult. Number one, because it happened during a time in the mid-1980s, way back then, when things weren't talked about like they are talked about today. I mean, everybody's so open today discussing every issue, which is why I'm here talking with you, because, these things need to be discussed, and, people need to know that they have a place where they can turn to. So I'm hoping that in sharing, some of my experiences that I went through, because that traumatic experience led to a whole snowball effect of negative experiences.
Right.
And so, I'm really hoping today that my strength, my ability to overcome all of the things that I had to face will help somebody out there. And I just want to start off by saying that if you or anyone you know is going through some kind of whatever it is, whether it's depression, trauma, abuse, whatever kind of situation is that you don't know how to deal with, please talk to somebody. Find someone to talk to, because it will help. And if you have no one to talk to, find me on Facebook and come and talk to me.
Thank you.
Because I have been through so much, and I am here to help. Now, with that said, after I was raped, I'll get into a bit about what happened to me here. So I quit school, I was in high school at the time. I ended up quitting, and I actually quit for 4 consecutive semesters. I'd quit, I'd go back, I'd try again. I was so depressed and so I can't even find the words to describe the feelings that I felt, because it was just, they were so horrific. Like I didn't have any desire to live. I didn't have any desire to get out of bed in the morning. I suffered from severe depression. When I was 15, I even tried killing myself. It was just so hard to deal with, because I didn't have anyone to talk to about what happened to me. I kept everything inside, and all those feelings inside just festered, and they ate me up, and it was just so awful. And, I tried dealing with them by turning to food and drugs. I started drinking. My whole entire mindset was changed. I was brought up as a Catholic girl, and I was taught, you save your virginity till you're married. And at that point I thought, okay, well, I'm dirty. I'm sullied. No one's going to want me now. And so because of all my thoughts about love and sex were jumbled. One doesn't necessarily mean that, you get the other, or, vice versa. And I stupidly thought at that point afterwards that if I gave guys sex, they would love me. And so I became promiscuous, with the drugs and the drinking. I started going into bars. I looked older than what I was, and so I was able to get in, and they didn't really check IDs back then. And so I'd go home with whoever basically wanted me. And that was my life for about 2 years, and it was horrible. In fact, my mom said it was like living with a zombie for 2 years. Mm. And, she didn't know. She had no idea. I didn't tell her what had happened to me. Not until years later. I think I was 22 when I first admitted to someone about what happened to me. And that was when I got counseling. But in the meantime, I went through an abortion at 16. I went through a lot of promiscuity and being used and allowing myself to be used because I didn't know any better. And I even got involved with prostitution because at one point I had an opportunity. I was actually hitchhiking one day, and the guy that gave me a ride made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And I figured, you know what? I'm giving it away for free. I might as well get paid for it. And so that's how that all started. And yeah, so I mean, it's been one hell of a journey. I ended up a single mom at the age of 18. When I found out I was pregnant the second time, I decided to keep my son because of a story my mom had told me when I was pregnant the first time. I did tell her that I got pregnant when I was 16 and that I didn't know what to do and that I was considering an abortion. And she told me a story about one of my uncles who had dated a woman who I thought they were going to get married. I thought she was going to be my aunt. She was one of the best people I had ever met, and they ended up splitting up. And I found out at that point, my mom told me that she got an abortion and now she can't have children. Mm. And when I got pregnant the second time, I thought, holy crap, here's this woman out there who really wants children. She ended up marrying some guy. They wanted children. They couldn't have any. And here's me, a 17-year-old teenager with her whole life ahead of her, apparently. And I can have a kid and she can't. It's not fair. And I thought, I have to have this kid. I have to keep this baby. And just because, she couldn't. And so that was my thinking back then. And I ended up keeping my son, and he has been probably the brightest light in my life ever since. He has saved my life more than once. I suffered from suicidal thoughts for years and years and years and years and years. And like I said, I was 22 when I got counseling. After I had my son, I did go back to school, I went into a program for single mothers, and I was able to get my high schooling finished through. It was a really cool kind of program. It was like correspondence courses, but it was actually at a school, at the Adult Education Center. And so I was able, it took me 4 years to complete my high schooling from that point, but I did it, and I was able to get all of the prerequisites for the program I wanted to enter in university, which was teaching. I wanted to get into teaching. And so I actually did become a high school math and English teacher. I did go to university for 5 years. It was a 4-year program, but it took me 5 years just because I failed one class 1 year, and it was, it was mandatory that I pass it before I could move on. So I had to take a whole extra year just to get that extra credit. And yeah, I mean, whatever. I did it, though. It took me, just a year longer. So I ended up teaching high school for 3.5 years. I had to move away to a small town in order to do that. But I did. And all throughout those years, I did go to counseling, and I, tried learning some techniques on how to cope with my feelings, and what to do when I got really stressed out, because it was like an automatic reflex to me. It's like as soon as something stressful, which was a lot of times, being a single mom and trying to juggle a career and parenthood and everything else, it was always like my gut reaction to think, well, I just want to end this all. I just want to end it all. I just want this pain to go away. I don't want to deal with this. And, and I couldn't leave my son motherless. And so that's why I say that he saved my life more than once, because
wow,
he was the only reason that kept me going. I mean, being a single mom, I knew that if something ever happened to me, he wouldn't have anyone. And I mean, yes, he would have my parents, but I mean, I'm not going to burden my parents with having to raise my kid when he's my responsibility.
Right.
And I also didn't want to psychologically mess him up, like, oh, my mom killed herself. Like, how do you explain that to your friends and to your teachers? And I just didn't want to do that to him. And so he was the reason why I kept going. And even though I ended up quitting high school and falling back into, moving back home and getting back into prostitution, pretty much because it paid more. Our relationship went through, my relationship with my son, like we went through our ups and downs, and we definitely faced our challenges over the years. At one point when he was 19, he moved out and basically disowned me, because at that time I was back doing drugs and prostituting myself, and he found out what I was doing, and he disowned me and moved out and didn't have any kind of contact with me for 3 years. And it was during that period of my life that two things happened. The first is I hit my absolute rock bottom, because for the first 10 months after he moved out, I spiraled downward even further and smoked crack for 10 months. Then it was after that I realized, like, hey, I have to pull myself up. I have to change my life if I ever want a chance of having a relationship with my son again. And, he was the most important person in the world to me. And so that's what I did. I cleaned myself up. I quit smoking drugs. I quit smoking crack. I got off the streets. I started spending more and more time with my family, with my parents, and basically started getting healthy. And the second thing that happened during that point is, ironically enough, after I started getting healthy, my appendix burst.
Oh.
And I had no idea what was happening. One day I was in a severe amount of pain, and I'm talking the worst pain imaginable. I ended up calling 911 and going to the hospital. And that night they did emergency surgery on me. And when I was in the hospital, I had my aha moment, because I was literally faced with death. Like, I was literally dying. and the doctor saved my life. And as I was going through all this pain and realizing like, oh my God, this could be the end of it. Like I felt like I was dying. I was literally dying. I had a huge infection. The doctor said it was a good thing we operated because they wanted to just give me, prescription and send me home. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, anyway, the next day she comes in and she says, yeah, she said, you had a major infection. Your appendix is like in a whole bunch of pieces. We had to go digging around to get them out. She says, you're going to be sore for a few months from this while you heal. I'm like, that's okay. You saved my life. And faced with that possibility of death, I realized I actually didn't want to die. Despite having suicidal thoughts for all those years, I actually didn't want to die. I simply wanted my pain to end. I wanted to live and I wanted to achieve my dreams. And at that point, I decided to hunt my son down and find out where he was, try to reestablish contact with him. And, telling him like I had quit drugs. I quit, working on the street. I quit prostituting. My life was different now. And I found out when he was working. I found out where he was working. And then I found out when he was working. And I called him at work. And we had a huge conversation. And I guess he could tell just by talking to me, something in the tone of my voice, something in the way I was speaking. He knew I was telling the truth. And it wasn't just some kind of, bullshit phone call. And he ended up giving me another chance. We ended up speaking and reconnecting. And this is back in late 2012, because it was just after Christmas time that year that I bought my very first laptop computer and started blogging. And it was all because of that. Earlier I mentioned a snowball effect from one negative event, carrying on to all these other negative events in my life. Well, that was the turning point, because at that point, reconnecting with my son allowed me to start a snowball effect of positive events. and it's just simply amazing. And there's a lot of this story is actually, I wrote it out when I started blogging. I started sharing things I started the website and I started sharing things. So a lot of things are, like mini stories all, kind of added up together, but they're all in different blog posts on my website. So I reconnected with my son and I 4 days after I bought my computer, I started blogging. I shared, all of the different positive things that happened after we reconnected. I started my own business. I had always talked about pursuing a career in the writing field. And so I learned about self-publishing, and I ended up publishing a couple of books. I have plans to publish more as well. I started doing writing for others, becoming a freelance writer. I started becoming a freelance editor, helping people edit their books, and then helping other people. Once I became an author, I started helping other people become authors. And it was all because of that switch and, from reconnecting with my son and being positive and just moving forward. Like he and I, we talked about things at length, and, he forgave me for what I had done, and he helped me. He's like, Mom, we got to move forward. That's how we are. We don't look at the past. We're not going to dwell on the past. We're just going to look to the future and, and make it the best future we can possibly make it. And so, again, my son came to my rescue, and with his support and encouragement, I was able to, get the ball rolling in the right direction. And he should know that I'm so grateful to him for everything. I mean, he's such an amazing person. And I look at him and I think, sometimes I think, how can you be my son? But at the same time, I am extremely proud of him. And he's just been like kind of my rock throughout my whole journey. I mean, he's 28 years old now. I just turned 47, and he and I are at probably the best place that we've ever been in our lives with each other. It's got a happy ending. It's a sad story. It was a lot of, tears and fights and screaming and everything throughout the years. But now, I can look back and I can say, like, yeah, we went through hell and back a few times, but you know what? We made it. We survived it and we came out on top. And so, yeah, so that's my basically my life story. And I won't say in a nutshell, because it took me how long to explain it to you, but,
right.
But yeah, so whatever you want to kind of, pick
totally,
apart from that.
totally. And I don't usually stay quiet that long, but I love it when obviously you've come to terms with your story and you've told it enough that you've learned how to get to all the key points in the story, which is a beautiful thing, because part of the reason I started this show is I believe, we're all on a journey and we've all been through shit, right? I mean, some absolutely more tragic than others, but it's in the telling of that story that oftentimes we find out who we are and we find ourselves. So beautiful, and thank you for sharing the tragic times in your life. But you're 14 years old, and an unfortunate rape, that's a horrible way of saying it. Rape happens, right? There's no fortunate rape. Happens, and that starts you down this cataclysmic whole ride of your life, which is so important you share that story, because you're right. When we were growing up, you and I were growing up, nobody talked about it. It was almost forbidden to talk about this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I was raised in the Catholic faith as well, and God forbid that, you said anything and tainted the Catholic way of life, during that time.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you weren't going to go to your priest at that point.
No, I had no one I could turn to. I probably, looking back, I probably could have told my mother, but I didn't feel as though I could. I didn't feel as though I could actually tell anyone.
Why do you think you went so radio silent, so dark, that you could not share that moment?
Well, part of it, as crazy as it may sound now, I thought it was my fault.
Mm.
And, I was always, told, God's watching you. God's going to punish you if you do something wrong. And that night that it happened, I had gotten into a fight with my father. And for the first time in my life, I ran away from home. And it was like 6:00 in the evening, and he grounded me. I had an exam the next day at school, so I was, supposed to be studying anyway. Well, I took the biggest purse I had, I packed my notes in it, and I just took off out the window, and he had no idea. And that night, the person that I stayed with, who was an older friend of an older friend, who I had actually met before, he told me I could stay at his place and that he'd give me a ride to school for my exam the next day. And I thought, okay, perfect. And then it was that night, and it was him who raped me. And I thought it was because I ran away. I was being punished. Mm. And so that guilt and those thoughts, it took, like, when I first started counseling, it took like several months of me talking to a counselor before I could actually realize that, it wasn't my fault, because I fought him every step of the way. I said no, I screamed, I fought, I pushed, I cried, I explained to him, I told him I was a virgin. He didn't give a shit. He just wanted what he wanted, and he took it, and that was it. Didn't care about me. And the counselor helped me realize that, number one, I was still essentially a child and not able to fight an adult and win. And number two, I did everything in my power that I could to stop him and say no and get him to, just leave me alone. And it didn't work because it was not my fault. It was him who was making the decision to do what he was doing.
And that's a huge point that everybody needs to absolutely hear right now. Rape is never it's never the victim's fault.
No, ever. It isn't. It doesn't matter how you're dressed. They always say, oh, well, look at how she was dressed. She was asking for it. Like, fuck you. That is not true.
Right.
It is. No one ever asks to be raped.
Right.
Like, ever. Like, oh, it's just, it's so frustrating because, like, yes, it's been, I'm 47, so it's been 33 years since it happened to me. And I still, I still get angry about what he did to me. And I still, I still hate him for it. Yes, I have come to terms with it. And now I have tried turning the whole situation so that it has a positive outcome. And by that, I mean, I talked about it like when I first started blogging. I wrote about my whole experience with suicide and why I tried to kill myself. And that was because I was raped and didn't know how to deal with things. And that article that I wrote about my suicide attempt ended up getting like hundreds and hundreds of readers. Like at one point I had over 500 people a day reading that article. And when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, I can't believe there's that many people out there that are suicidal and depressed and feeling to the point where they don't know what to do. And I thought, it was at that point that I decided to help people even further. I wanted to put a stop to all this suffering, and I wanted to help people. And so that's why I wrote my book, my second book, which is called From Nope to Hope. So From Nope to Hope was written to help all those people out of their funk or their depression or whatever it is that they were in, and to help them move towards a better life. And so in that book, I shared all the different strategies and techniques that I use and still use to this day to, whenever I get feeling like suicidal or depressed, or actually I don't, it's been a long time since I felt suicidal. They don't happen nearly as much anymore as they used to, those kind of thoughts. But I still do suffer from, I get my bouts of depression where I just don't care about anything, don't want to do anything. I don't have motivation and things like that. So that's when I turn to some of the techniques that have really worked for me. And the one that is my first go-to technique is using positive affirmations. I swear by those things. Like, they have helped me change my mindset so much so to the point where I have now accomplished things I had only dreamed about before. I dreamed about starting my own writing. Well, I didn't dream about starting my own writing and editing business. That just kind of happened. But I dreamed about becoming an author. And I dreamed about having people recognize my name and knowing my name was associated with a certain thing. Like, when you hear Mike Tyson's name, you think, oh, well, he's the fighter, right? He's the boxer, fighter, whatever it is he does. When you hear Eddie Murphy's name, you hear, oh, well, he's the comedian and actor. When you hear Oprah's name, like Oprah, I mean, everybody's heard of Oprah. Or even Ellen DeGeneres, the comedian turned talk show host, right? Like, I wanted my name to be known like, oh, Lorraine, oh, she's the lady that helps everybody. Or she, through kind of like Maya Angelou, she was basically, I've been compared to her in the past, and that's why I bring her name up, because she was a woman who dealt with, all different kinds of struggles too, including prostitution. And she became known for helping other people and inspiring other people and, all those kinds of things. And I want to be known and remembered for, like, hey, that was Lorraine. She had a hell of a life, but she ended up helping so many people in the end. And so that's why, I'm here talking, sharing my story.
Absolutely. And here's what I wonder is you went through and your hernia ruptured, and that was that awakening moment for you. Mm-hmm. I don't think everybody has to have an awakening moment. No, right?
No, they just have to make the decision that they want something.
So how
change?
Yeah, I mean, so how does somebody get to that point? They've been through a traumatic experience. They've been through something they've never told anybody, which I guarantee people listening to this show right now have things they've never shared, they've never told. Mm-hmm. How do they get to the point to where, I believe your story is your success. What you have been through, will become your success and will be the thing that catapults you to greatness. Right? how do they find that? I mean, how do they find that courage, that strength to say, now's my time?
Well, I'm really glad that you asked that, Donnie, because it's really not a whole huge, it doesn't have to be a whole huge event. What it is, what it really boils down to is making a decision for yourself that you want your life to be better. And that's all it is. You want your life to be better, and you're willing to work for a better life. That's the second part. If you're willing to work towards a better life, then what you need to do is take baby steps every single day so that you are on that path. And it doesn't have to be like super huge. It could just be first writing in a journal saying, okay, this is what I want, admitting to yourself. That's the first thing. You have to admit to yourself that, yes, I'm ready to deal with this and move on and be happy. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Yes, you can talk to somebody. You can find someone to talk to about it. You can go through counseling. You can do all that kind of stuff. But if you don't want to go that route, there's other ways that you can do things yourself, just to bring yourself onto that path. And one of those things is by using positive affirmations, which I want to talk about this for a minute because I actually wrote a whole chapter in my book about this, and I have made it available for free on my website. So positive affirmations, and the chapter I wrote talks about what they are, how they work, gives you some samples, and then asks the person to create some of their own. You can use whatever samples I provided. You can tailor them and make them more relevant to your own life. And then you use them every single day. And by using them, I mean you read them off of your paper silently to yourself or out loud or both or mix it up, but use them every single day. And the reason I love positive affirmations so much is because after a short a time as 1 week, they start working. It's like, boom, something just clicks in your brain.
But on affirmations, it's not something you can say just one time and you're fixed.
No, you have to constantly say them, because what you need to do is you need to retrain your thinking process. You need to retrain your brain. So if you're the type of person who always, and I'll just use this, I'll use myself as an example. Like, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm worthless, I don't know how to do things, no one's ever going to love me, blah, blah, blah. All of that, that's negative self-talk. What you need to do is you need to take all of those and you need to switch them around. Even if you don't believe them at first, you will eventually start to believe them, because if you are told something often enough, you will believe it. And that works both for positive and negative. Like, I grew up, my dad always used to tell me, Lorraine, you're nuts, blah, blah, blah. And I used to think, oh my God, like I'm crazy. Eventually that's what I started to think. And, so I had to, change my whole mindset, my whole way of thinking. I had to start telling myself, you are worthy. You are enough. You are beautiful. You are talented. You can achieve whatever it is you want to do. So I did. I started telling myself all those things. And then, as I started changing the way I looked at myself, I started adding more affirmations, making them more relevant to my dreams and to what I wanted. Like, I would tell myself, you are a published author. You are a helpful person. You are making a difference in the world. And now those things are true. They weren't true when I first started, and they might, yours aren't going to be true for you either, but they will come true. And that's the power of positive affirmations. And that is why I love them so much. So that is something that each and every person can do themselves without anyone else knowing, to take a positive step every day towards the path they want to be on. And that's just one thing. There's like tons of other things you can do.
No, that's awesome.
That will lead, like I call this my secret to happiness, because honestly, if it wasn't for positive affirmations, I would not be as happy as I am today.
Oh, that's so awesome.
I talk about this so much, and the reason I love these things so much and I'm so passionate about them is because, number one, they work. Number two, they're easy. It's an easy thing to do. Number three, you have nothing to lose by trying them. Like, I only learned about these about 4 years ago. I didn't even know that positive, I didn't really understand how to use them and what to do. I had heard about them briefly, but I didn't really, take too much time to study them or anything. But once I actually took the time to do them and use them on a daily basis, I started seeing results, and I started seeing results fast. So that's why I'm super passionate about them, and I encourage everyone to go on the internet and read about them. I wrote an article called How to Use Positive Affirmations to Improve Your Life. It's actually a chapter from my book, free on my website, wordingwell.com. So please, I encourage you, give them a try. Take a week, give them a try. It takes literally 5 minutes a day to read through a list, less than 5 minutes. And if you're willing to, if you really want to make one change in your life today, that's something that you can do easily.
Well, and I want to add just a little to that on the back end is, whatever you're going through, hopefully it's not as traumatic as what Lorraine's been through, but whatever your story is, whatever the thing you've been through is one, don't keep it bottled up. Don't keep it inside, because I think Lorraine would 100% vouch that's what caused her severe downward spiral, was the not telling and not either getting help or telling somebody in authority or something to get that out there. The second thing is, if you've gotten the help and support, start sharing that story, because it's that added layer of how do I get that out? I mean, it's that escapism is not the right word, but it helps you detach from that moment in your life.
And I can attest to that, because I've been on several podcasts now telling my story and sharing my story with other people, and the more I talk about it and the more I share it and help and try and help people, the more therapeutic it is for me as well. So, and it does get easier. It gets easier to talk about. I've talked about so many different things regarding my life, and I've written a lot of things because writing for me is therapeutic as well. But not everybody enjoys writing like I do. So that's why talking is like the next best thing. But yes, sorry to interrupt, but yes, I can attest.
No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Sharing with other people is definitely something that we need to do more of, because you could just tell tell the person and make a difference in that person's life too. Give them the courage to want to speak up and share. And I mean, look at the whole hashtag Me Too movement. That was huge on Twitter last year. It all started, or maybe it was like 2 years ago now. But yeah, it all started by somebody sharing, the fact that they went through a rape or a trauma, and they encouraged other people. Instead of speaking up, they just wanted people to use the hashtag Me Too. It's like this little tiny whisper in the room. Yep, me too. Me too. Me too. And it's so sad that there were so many people, that started using that hashtag and it's like a catch-22. It's sad that it happened to so many people, but on the upside, it's good that people are finally starting to talk about it. So,
Absolutely. It's amazing that I've had the honor to help so many people share their stories, and just like yours, Lorraine, I mean, of tragedies. I've had Brian Cordoza on here, talks about being, raped as a young boy.
Oh, God, yes. I listened to his story. I cried the whole way through.
And it's for all too long, especially in our generation, Lorraine, as we grew up, it was so full pop. I mean, nothing was talked about like that. So I'm glad that some of you guys have found the courage to come forward to talk about these experiences, because there's going to be kids that are dealing with these issues and everything else right now, and there's got to be a light, right? And I think the people that come forward become that beacon for other people to come find, because maybe they don't feel comfortable going to a counselor, their parents, their whatever else. They can come to people like you that come out on the other side of this and on their journey and found themselves, so they can come to and talk. So in that regards, how do people reach out to you? How do they come find you? How do they find your books? How do they connect with you?
Well, my name is Lorraine Reguly, and if you think of the word regular, you can kind of remember my last name. It's just a variation. It's Reguly instead of regular. So, and that's how I try and tell people how to pronounce my name too. It's like regular, but Reguly. And so Reguly, Reguly. I'm on Facebook. That's my probably Facebook or email is the best way to get a hold of me. And only because I check my Facebook notifications every day. I have to, otherwise they just pile up and it gets too overwhelming. But yeah, Facebook is probably the best way, although I am on other social media. You know, I'm on Twitter, but I don't check Twitter too often. So Facebook's the best way to get a hold of me. Email me if you want. My phone number is even up on my website. So, I mean, if you can even call me if you're that desperate to talk, that's fine. Beautiful. I don't mind. I want people to know, like, yes, I'm here for you. I've written a lot about my different experiences. I do have 2 websites. One is LorraineReguly.com. Another one is wordingwell.com. And Wordingwell is my business site. But before it was my business site, it was this free site where I shared all kinds of stuff about my life on it. And so when I moved that website to my new one, that's why Wordingwell, like if you look back in the older archives, it's got all the stories about like my suicide attempt, how I reconnected with my son. It includes like some poetry that I wrote, like a letter to my son, all different kinds of things. Plus the free chapters of my book are on that. Yeah, I mean, just reach, I'm a friendly person. I'm easy to get along with. Reach out to me. Just say, hey, heard your podcast. You touched a note with me, and I just wanted to say hi even. I welcome even if you just wanted to say, hey, how's it going?
That's awesome.
Like cheers to you kind of thing. That's cool too,
That's awesome.
You don't have to have a sob story that you want to share with me. Just come say hi.
Love it. Love it. Lorraine, I got to tell you, it's been an honor to have you on the show sharing your story, and I really, really appreciate it. Here's how I like to finish up and wrap up every show. And I do stump some people on this one, so get ready. If you were going to leave my audience with a quote, a phrase, a mantra, an affirmation in your case, anything that they can use, especially when they're going through it. Maybe they're stacked up and they're going through the dark portion of their life, and they're looking for that light at the end of the tunnel. They're looking for that thing they can hold on to. What would be that quote or phrase you say when you're going through it? Remember this.
Everything happens for a reason. We might not know what that reason is at the time, but everything happens for a reason. Mm. And I strongly believe that because it's the only way I can justify what happened to me.
Beautiful.
There must have been a reason why I was raped. There must have been a reason why I tried to kill myself and failed. What's that reason? It's so I can share it with you. Mm. So hopefully you can learn from me. That's the only thing to me that makes sense, is that you have to believe in something. And so find that something to believe in. And for me, it's everything happens for a reason.
Beautiful. Lorraine, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your story, girl. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. I really hope people check out my book, because it's kind of like my self-help Bible these days. It's called From Nope to Hope. So just remember that.
We'll put links and everything in the show notes, guys, so you can go get that.
Awesome. Thank you, Donnie.
Thanks for listening to Donnie Success Champions podcast. If you'd like to hear more about our current guest today, or if you'd like to hear stories from our other guests on the show, come hang out with us on our website at successchampspodcast.com. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you need to reach out to me for any reason, you can catch me at Donnie@DonnieBoivin.com.